In the previous lessons, we learned that sometimes type int or type string is not enough, because sometimes we want to represent a person. So type int is not enough to represent a person. A string also is not enough to represent a person. A bool is also not enough to represent a person. But we want a type that can represent a person. So luckily we can do that. We are using the word class, and then we choose a name for our new type. And here are the fields. And this is a new type that represents a person. As we remember, these fields are marked as public, means that outside this class we have access to these fields: underscore ID, underscore first name, underscore last name. But these fields are marked as private, means that no one can access these fields outside this class. Here, for example, in this class program, we are outside this class person class. So here, when we declare a new variable of this type, this newly created type, when we declare a variable p1 of type person class, we can of course access the fields, the public fields: underscore ID, we can set a value, underscore first name, underscore last name. But these fields are inaccessible because they are private. As we can see that the Visual Studio is letting us know that here we have an error, the red wavy line. So we cannot set a value to these fields. We cannot get the value. If there is a value in these fields, we cannot get them out. So how can we interact with these fields? The answer is that we have two ways to interact with these fields, even though they are private. And in this lesson we are going to learn one of the methods. And the way is very simple. Here are the fields, the private fields. And it's very simple. We are adding a methods to this class. This class person class, we are adding a method. Here we have one method, and here we have a second method. This method, its purpose is to set a value to this field, father's name. As we can see here, father's name equals something. This is the intention of this method. And this second method, its purpose is to get the value of father's name. These methods are public, so everybody can use them outside this class. Like we can use these fields because they are public. Also, these methods are public, so we can access these methods. So using these methods, for example, this method set father's name, we can set a value to this field. Father's name equals something. But of course, we add logic here. We build this method that is expecting two values. One value is the person's father's name. If we want to set a value to this field, we have to send in a value. So the first parameter is the person's father's name. But we have, for our example, I add here another parameter called password, because we do not want everyone to set a value to this field. If we want this field to be open, so we could write here public. We write here private in purpose, because we do not want everyone to set a value to this field. We want only a person, for our example of course, that knows the password. So that's why I add another parameter here in this method, second parameter called password. If someone wants to set a value to this field, it's simple. He needs to send a value who wants to set for father's name, and he must know the password. And if he knows the password, which is in our example 1, no problem. Call this method outside, of course, outside this class. Call this method, send it a value for the father's name, and send the password, and the method will set the father's name for us. Outside the class, we cannot access this field, but we can access this method. And this method, because this method is a part of this class, so this method do not have a problem to set a value to a private field, because this method is a part of this class. So the protection level does not apply for this method. This method can, no problem, set a value for this method, for this field, as we can see here, setting a value for the father's name. But of course, we add this logic that not everyone will use. We don't want everyone to use this method to set a value to this field father's name. Otherwise, we could, of course, write public here. Only the one who knows the password will be able to set a value. And exactly the same, the second method. This method is get father's name. This field father's name is private, so outside this class, no one can reach this field. Not even to see it, not even to get the value, not, of course, not to set the value, but not even to get the value, to see the value. But in some cases, we want to let someone to see the value. And this is the method that this method is public because of that. Everybody can access this method. Everybody can use this method. But if you want to see the value of the father's name, he must know the password. If he knows the password, which is in our example, of course, is equals 1. If he sends in the password, when he calls the method, he sends in the password 1, then the method returns the father's name. Returns the father's name. This method is returning a string. Else, if he doesn't know the password, then he gets an answer, you may not receive this information. So here we have two methods in order to deal with this private field, to let access only to people who thinks that they are allowed to see this, to set a value or to see a value, to see the value. And for the second field, mother's name, here we have another two methods, exactly the same. Of course, if the logic demands another logic, we can write it down, but for our example, we have the same logic. If he knows the password, he can set it a value. If he knows the password, he can have the value. And here is our class program, our main method, where the application begins. And here we create a variable of type person class. Here we set it a values for underscore ID, underscore first name, underscore last name. And what about these fields? Here we call this method P1. This is our variable. P1 set father's name. You call the method, this method is public, so we can call it. And we send in the two parameters. One, the first parameter is the father's name, and the second parameter is the password. Here we set a value for set mother's name, Victoria, and again the password is 1. And to get the value out of these fields, private field, Here we have who we call the get father's name and get mother's name. Of course, P1, this is our variable, and inside our variable we have a method get father's name, get mother's name, and we send the password, and we get the father's name here in this variable, string father's name, whatever the name we choose for, and get mother's name. And now we have a father's name and mother's name. And so now we can print them all. We can print p1 dot underscore id because this is private, public, and this is public, and this is public. But these two, father's name and mother's name, they are private. But we were able to get the values of them using these public methods after, of course, we send in the password. So let's see the result. Right click and debug, start new instance. And here we see the 123, Benjamin Smith, and Adam and Victoria. These values that we set before, and now we get them using the methods get father's name and get mother's name.